In 1974, a quiet house in Amityville, New York, became the scene of a brutal family murder. Just 1 year later, a new family moved in, only to flee weeks later, claiming the home was plagued by terrifying paranormal activity. Doors opened on their own, shadows moved in the night, and voices whispered through the halls. Was it truly haunted, or just one of history's most elaborate hoaxes? The story of Amityville begins on the night of November 13th, in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Long Island. Ronald DeFeo Jr., a 23-year-old man, took a rifle and murdered 6 members of his own family as they slept. His parents, 2 brothers, and 2 sisters were found in their beds, shot in cold blood. The killings shocked the community, not only because of the brutality, but because no one seemed to understand why. During his trial, DeFeo offered shifting explanations. At times he claimed he acted alone in a fit of rage. At others, he suggested sinister voices had commanded him to kill. Regardless of motive, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The DeFeo house, an ordinary Dutch colonial home with its distinctive quarter-moon windows, instantly became a symbol of horror. For months after the murders, the house stood empty. Neighbors whispered about the killings, and some claimed to see strange shadows in the windows at night. The tragedy alone was enough to give the place a dark reputation. Yet what happened next would transform the house from a crime scene into one of the most infamous haunted locations in the world. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz moved into the Amityville home with their 3 children. At first they were excited, having purchased the property for a fraction of its true value. But within days, their dream home turned into a nightmare. Strange odors filled the air, doors and windows slammed shut on their own, and unseen forces seemed to stalk the family at every hour. According to the Lutz family, the disturbances in the house escalated quickly. Cold spots appeared in certain rooms, no matter how high the thermostat was set. A swarm of flies suddenly materialized in the middle of winter, covering windows and walls before vanishing without explanation. Doors ripped off their hinges, and windows slammed with such force that the glass rattled in the frames. George Lutz, the father, reported waking up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the same time the DeFeo murders were believed to have occurred. Kathy Lutz claimed to experience terrifying visions. She described a shadowy figure looming over her bed, and on one occasion feeling invisible arms wrapped tightly around her body, holding her in place. She also reported mysterious welts and scratches appearing on her skin overnight. Their children spoke of an imaginary friend named Jody, a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes that they said watched them from the windows at night. George himself underwent strange behavioral changes. Friends later described him as withdrawn, angry, and obsessed with the house. He spent hours tending the fireplace, claiming he could not shake a constant chill in his bones. Kathy believed the house was influencing him, bending his mind with a dark presence. The family reached out to local priests for help. One priest who attempted to bless the house claimed he heard a disembodied voice shout, "Get out," when he sprinkled holy water in one of the upstairs rooms. Shaken, he advised the family to leave immediately, but the Lutzes stayed, hoping the disturbances would fade. Instead, the terror grew worse. As the weeks went on, the house seemed to tighten its grip on the Lutz family. George grew increasingly unstable, snapping at his wife and children, claiming he heard drums beating in the basement or footsteps pacing the halls at night. He reported seeing shadowy figures in the corner of his vision, figures that vanished the moment he turned his head. Kathy experienced vivid nightmares of the DeFeo murders, reliving the terror of that night through the eyes of the victims. The children, too, were affected. They woke screaming in the middle of the night, insisting that someone had been in their rooms. One child spoke of Jody, the pig-like entity with glowing red eyes, appearing not only in the house but outside in the yard, watching from the trees. On more than one occasion, George and Kathy claimed to see the red eyes staring at them from the darkness. Objects moved on their own, crucifixes twisted upside down, a black slime oozed from keyholes and walls. Even visitors to the house reported overwhelming feelings of dread, as though the walls themselves were saturated with despair. The family's dog, Harry, once found barking furiously at an empty corner of the yard, nearly hanged itself when its leash became inexplicably entangled. To the Lutzes, it was yet another sign that whatever plagued the house was growing stronger, more dangerous, and far beyond their control. By the end of January 1976, less than a month after moving in, the family reached their breaking point. They fled the Amityville house in the middle of the night, abandoning their belongings. They would never return. After the Lutz family fled, the story of Amityville exploded into national headlines. Newspapers seized on the tale of a family terrorized by paranormal forces in a house already stained by mass murder. The combination of true crime and supernatural horror proved irresistible, and soon the Amityville case was the subject of documentaries, books, and television specials. The most famous account came in 1977 with the publication of The Amityville Horror by J. Anson. Based on interviews with the Lutz family, the book described in chilling detail the events they claimed to have endured: levitating beds, demonic apparitions, and the constant presence of evil lurking in every room. It became an instant bestseller, capturing the public's imagination and sparking endless debate. Skeptics, however, were quick to question the Lutz's story. Investigators pointed out inconsistencies, noting that no physical evidence supported the more extreme claims. Neighbors reported seeing no unusual activity during the family's stay. Even the priest, whose blessing had supposedly been interrupted later, denied parts of the tale. Critics argued that the story had been exaggerated or perhaps entirely fabricated for profit, especially given the timing of the book deal. Despite these doubts, the legend only grew. Hollywood adapted the book into a 1979 film, The Amityville Horror, which terrified audiences and cemented the house's reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America. Over the years, numerous sequels and remakes followed, each adding new layers to the myth. The Amityville house itself became a macabre tourist attraction, drawing visitors eager to glimpse the infamous windows and imagine the horrors said to have unfolded inside. As the Amityville story spread, paranormal investigators descended upon the house to uncover the truth. Among the most famous were Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned demonologists who claimed the home was infested with a powerful demonic presence. According to their accounts, they captured chilling photographs and recorded disturbing phenomena: cold drafts, strange sounds, and unexplained shadows moving across walls. One photograph, allegedly showing the ghostly image of a young boy with glowing eyes, became iconic in the lore surrounding the house. Supporters of the Warrens argued that the evidence validated the Lutz family's claims. For them, the Amityville house was not just haunted, it was cursed, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead had been violently broken. The murders committed by Ronald DeFeo were seen as the spark that unleashed something dark and inhuman. But skeptics remained unconvinced. Photographs were dismissed as tricks of light, and recordings could be explained as environmental noises. Critics accused the Warrens of sensationalism, pointing out that their involvement coincided with the growing popularity of the Amityville story in the media. Scientists and psychologists suggested that the experiences of the Lutz family could be attributed to stress, trauma, or suggestion, rather than supernatural forces. The divide between believers and skeptics only fueled the legend. Each side clung to its version of the truth, while the house itself sat silently, watching as its reputation grew. The more it was debated, the more powerful the story became, turning Amityville into a cultural phenomenon that thrived on fear, fascination, and unanswered questions. As the years passed, the Amityville case evolved from a chilling news story into a cornerstone of paranormal folklore. Researchers, journalists, and thrill-seekers flocked to Long Island, hoping to glimpse the infamous Dutch colonial home with its quarter-moon windows. Yet the house itself remained strangely quiet. Families who later moved into the property reported little more than the nuisance of tourists and the weight of its reputation. None claimed to experience the kind of supernatural terror described by the Lutzes. This inconsistency raised more questions. If the house truly harbored dark forces, why did the phenomena stop after the Lutz family left? Skeptics suggested that the events were never real, only fabricated to capitalize on the gruesome history of the DeFeo murders. The timing of the Lutz's departure, just 28 days after moving in, and their immediate collaboration with writers and filmmakers added fuel to suspicions of a hoax. Yet believers argued otherwise. They claimed that the house remained dormant. Its malevolent energy stirred only under certain conditions. To them, the DeFeo murders were the trigger, and the Lutz family the unfortunate victims caught in its aftermath. The absence of later reports was seen not as disproof, but as evidence that the house had returned to a state of slumber, waiting for the right moment to awaken again. The clash between skepticism and belief gave Amityville its enduring power. Whether haunted or fabricated, the story resonated with deep fears of home, family, and safety. Turned upside down, it became more than a house on Ocean Avenue. It became a mirror, reflecting humanity's fascination with evil, the unknown, and the possibility that horror can hide in plain sight. By the late 20th century, Amityville had become less a haunting and more a phenomenon. The name itself carried weight, instantly recognizable as shorthand for horror. Countless documentaries revisited the case, each offering new interviews, dramatizations, and evidence. Television crews filmed inside the house, carefully framing shots of its iconic windows as if the architecture itself carried an evil presence. Meanwhile, Ronald DeFeo Jr., the man whose crime had begun the story, lived out his life in prison. Over the years, he gave conflicting accounts of the murders. Sometimes he claimed insanity. At other times, he hinted at supernatural influence. His shifting explanations only deepened the mystery, blurring the line between fact and fiction. Was he simply manipulating his story to gain attention, or had he truly believed something darker was at play the night he killed his family? The entertainment industry ensured that the story would never fade. Films continued to expand on the legend, with each adaptation exaggerating or reinventing the tale for new audiences. The Lutz's 28 Days of Terror became a cultural myth, retold and reimagined until it was impossible to separate reality from invention. For skeptics, Amityville became a case study in mass hysteria, media sensationalism, and the ways in which stories grow larger than life. For believers, it remained proof that evil could infest not just a person, but an entire place. The divide between these two perspectives kept the debate alive. Decades after the Lutz family fled, the house on Ocean Avenue still stood, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in legend. Today, the Amityville house remains one of the most famous addresses in America. Though its exterior has been renovated and its address changed to deter tourists, curious visitors still drive past, eager to glimpse the home that inspired books, films, and endless debate. For the families who have lived there since, the greatest haunting has been the constant stream of attention rather than any paranormal activity. Still, the legend persists. Paranormal enthusiasts argue that the absence of recent reports does not erase the possibility of the house's dark history. They see Amityville as a place where tragedy, trauma, and perhaps something more sinister once converged. Skeptics, however, view it as a cautionary tale of how storytelling, media, and profit can transform a house into a cultural phenomenon. Regardless of belief, Amityville endures because it touches on primal fears. A home meant to be a sanctuary becomes instead a place of terror. A family meant to protect each other is torn apart by violence and fear. Whether through true supernatural forces or human imagination, the story embodies the horror of safety turned into danger, of trust corrupted by evil. In the end, the Amityville case may never be fully resolved. The truth lies somewhere between murder, myth, and memory. The murders of the DeFeo family were real. The experiences of the Lutzes remain contested. But the legend that grew from those events has achieved a life of its own, haunting not only a house in New York but the imagination of the world. The Amityville house stands as one of history's most chilling enigmas. Was it truly haunted by dark forces, or was it a story shaped by fear, tragedy, and imagination? Decades later, the line between fact and fiction is still blurred. One truth remains: the events of Amityville remind us that the scariest places are often not distant forests or abandoned ruins, but the homes where we expect to feel safest.